Picture this. You're an invading soldier standing at the bottom of a massive stone wall. It's raining, you're freezing, and suddenly a bucket of boiling liquid is dumped directly onto your head. You think it's oil because that's what the movies told you. But oil is expensive. What's hitting your face right now is actually a boiling cocktail of human waste, scalding water, and hot sand that slips inside your armor and cooks your skin. Hollywood lied to you. Modern movies and fantasy shows love to present medieval castles as these grand, romantic, pristine stone palaces where noble kings gave inspiring speeches and knights lived in spotless luxury. But the reality, the actual, raw, unfiltered truth of what it was like to live inside a medieval castle, is infinitely crazier, darker, and way more disgusting than anything you've seen on TV. Today, we are stripping away the myth. No CGI, no romantic lighting. We are breaking down what medieval castles were actually like, from the secret psychological warfare built into the stairs to the stomach-churning reality of the bathrooms, and why attacking one was a literal suicide mission. If you think you'd survive a week in a real 13th century castle, think again. Let's start with the first thing everyone gets wrong: the look. When you see a castle today, you see beautiful weathered grey stone. It looks rustic and ancient. But if you walked up to a castle in the year 1250, it wouldn't look like that at all. It would look bright, garish, and kind of blinding. That's because castles were covered in a substance called lime wash. They were painted bright, brilliant white from top to bottom. Why? Pure psychological warfare. A lord didn't want his castle to blend into the mountains. He wanted it to scream, "Look at how much money I have. Look at this massive white fortress of doom, and do not even think about messing with me." It was a giant billboard of power, visible from miles away. But the moment you stepped inside that beautiful white fortress, the illusion shattered. The first thing that would hit you, well before you saw anything, was the smell. We cannot overstate how catastrophically bad a medieval castle smelled. Think about the bathrooms. They didn't have plumbing. They had garderobes. A garderobe was essentially a small room with a wooden or stone bench that had a hole cut into it. That hole opened up directly to the outside of the castle. If you were lucky, your waste fell into a moat. If you weren't lucky, it just slid down the side of the castle wall, baking in the afternoon sun, forming a massive towering pile of sludge at the base of the tower. And it gets worse. People knew it smelled terrible, so they actually hung their expensive clothes inside the bathrooms. Why? Because the high concentration of ammonia from the urine fumes actually killed the fleas and lice living in their garments. Yes, the wealthiest people in the kingdom purposefully kept their finest silk robes in the literal poop room to keep the bugs away. Now let's talk about the living conditions, because if you think the king was lounging in a cozy, warm master bedroom, you are dead wrong. Castles were essentially giant, damp stone refrigerators. Stone is terrible at retaining heat. In the winter, the walls would sweat with condensation. The draft running through the halls was so intense that candles would blow out constantly. To fight the dampness and the chill, they covered the floors in loose straw or rushes. It sounds kind of cozy, like a rustic cabin, right? Except they didn't change the straw very often. Erasmus, a famous historical scholar, wrote that the bottom layers of castle straw would often remain undisturbed for 20 years. 20 years of spilled ale, dropped grease, dog vomit, human sweat, and fragments of old food, all rotting together under a fresh layer of green rushes. It was a 5-star resort for rats, mice, and flesh-eating bacteria. To hide the smell of the floor, they would throw dried lavender or chamomile on top, creating a bizarre scent profile of rotting meat and floral air freshener. To keep the dampness from freezing them to death at night, they didn't just sleep under blankets. They hung massive heavy tapestries on the walls. Those beautiful medieval tapestries you see in museums weren't just art. They were literally insulation designed to stop the freezing stone walls from radiating cold air directly onto the bed. But despite the smell, the cold and the dampness, the castle was still the safest place on Earth. And that's because the architecture wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed to kill you if you tried to get inside. Imagine you are an enemy soldier who has somehow managed to breach the outer gate. You think you're in. You're celebrating. Suddenly an iron grate slams down behind you and another slams down in front of you. You are trapped in a tiny stone room called a killing choke. You look up and the ceiling is full of holes. These are called murder holes. And through these holes, the castle defenders aren't just shooting arrows. They are pouring down whatever they have. It could be boiling water, it could be hot ash, or it could be that boiling sand we talked about earlier. Hot sand was particularly terrifying because it would find its way into the seams of your armor, burning through your clothes and sticking to your skin, making it impossible to scrape off. Let's say you miraculously survive the murder holes. Your buddies smash through the inner gate, and you start fighting your way up the spiral staircases of the castle's main tower. You're running up the stairs, sword drawn, ready to take the Lord's head. Suddenly, you stumble. You trip over a step that is just an inch higher than all the rest, lose your balance, and get stabbed through the neck by a defender waiting at the top. That stumble wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad masonry. It was intentional. Every single spiral staircase in a medieval castle was built with an extreme level of calculation. First, they always spiraled clockwise as you went up. Why? Because almost all swordsmen are right-handed. If you are attacking and moving up the stairs, the central stone pillar of the staircase is on your right side, completely blocking your sword arm from swinging. But for the defender coming down the stairs, their right arm has all the room in the world to swing and hack away at you. On top of that, the builders purposefully made the steps uneven. They would randomly make one step slightly taller or deeper than the others. The defenders lived there. They knew the trip step by heart. The attackers, running up in dark, smoky corridors with helmets blocking their vision, would inevitably trip. It was a brilliant low-tech security system that worked every single time. And what about the dungeon? We all know the classic image. A dark, subterranean iron cage filled with skeletons and torture devices. In reality, most castles didn't have dungeons like that. Space was too valuable. If you were a regular peasant captured during a siege, nobody wasted food keeping you in a cellar. You were either executed on the spot or let go. If you were a noble or a rival knight, you were a valuable paycheck. You were held for ransom. You wouldn't be thrown into a dark pit. You'd often be given a decent room in one of the upper towers. You might even eat dinner with the lord of the castle, go hunting with him, and hang out, all while waiting for your family to send a massive bag of gold to buy you back. You were an investment, not a prisoner. Living in a castle wasn't just a physical challenge, it was a psychological test. The walls were thick. The windows were tiny slits to prevent archers from shooting inside, and the atmosphere was one of constant paranoia. You were always preparing for a siege, and when a siege actually happened, the castle transformed from a fortress into a pressure cooker of human misery. So why did anyone want to live there? Because despite the horrific smells, the bone-chilling cold, the rotting straw, and the constant threat of being dropped into a hole and forgotten, the castle represented one thing that nothing else in the medieval world could offer: survival. If you were outside those walls when an invading army showed up, you were dead. Inside, you at least had a fighting chance, even if that chance meant eating leather and sleeping next to 20-year-old garbage. The medieval world wasn't a fairy tale of clean stone and shiny armour. It was a brutal, gritty, highly calculated world of survival, where architectural genius met absolute human grime. So the next time you watch a movie and see a king standing on a flawless, pristine stone balcony, just remember the towering pile of sludge waiting right below him.